every time he could find them, and I'd find them and throw them away.
So his health
He
got
just
worse.
couldn't. Yeah. Well, he went to the doctor, and they put him in some therapy work. He absolutely hated it. I'd have to bring him up there almost every other day to go through this therapy, and he just wouldn't do anything. Well, then he had a small stroke, and I had to call the doctor, and he came to the house, and they took him back to the hospital again. And then it just went from that to the kidneys, and the kidneys failed. And when they brought me into this room where they had to decide what they had to do with the patients, and they had to tell me that they couldn't keep him in the hospital any longer, and I had to find someplace, either a nursing home or someplace, and I started to go look at all the nursing homes, and I said, I just can't put him in there. And then the hospital said they had an opening in their nursing home, which is connected to the hospital. And they said that he had another person in the room with him, but he hated it. And he'd have to take him up and go to the food table to eat. And since he had the stroke, he couldn't eat very well. And then when the kidneys failed, he had to go through dialysis. And it was when he was in dialysis that Sally called. And, well, she said she wanted to come and see Bill. And I said, well, he's in dialysis now. And she said, well, I'm on my way over. And I said, well, this usually takes 4 hours. And I said, well, where are you now? And she said, well, I'm at Laurelville. She was all that far before she called. Well, I said, come on, I can take you up to where he is. And so she came to the hospital, and I brought her in the room with, and I didn't stay, because I thought it was up to them what they were going to talk about. But she was crying when she came out. And I said, well, you know, and she was ready to go home. And I said, well, as far as I can think we will plan to do, I wanted to rent an apartment next door to the hospital so that it would be close if he had to go to dialysis that many times, it'd be right there. And I said, I'm going to sell our place. And I've had it up for sale. So that's all I talked to her, and she left. So that was the last time she saw him. But
he passed away March 12th, 2003?
2003.
How many years were you married?
Had to have been 55. Yeah, 55.
So how'd you get down to Salado then?
Well, how I did after that?
You sold that house?
Yeah.
And bought this house?
I went back. Well, Bill had told me how he wanted his funeral. He always knew. He always told me all these years before that he would probably die first. And anything we would have to do, he said, you might as well learn how to do this because you're going to live longer than I am. And even how to write checks and handle this and anything, you know, so you might as well learn how to do this. So I packed all the cars. I packed everything. And so I already knew the things I had to do. And so it was after he passed away, because he is the one that said, I do not want a service. I want you to take the kids somewhere special, all of them, grandkids and all, and just remember the good times.
And that was here.
And that was here. And that's when I told you guys after he passed away and you were all there at the house, this is what he wanted. And so you mentioned, well, why don't we go to Salado? Because he always told us he wanted his ashes over that bridge. And I said, okay, I'll call right now. I'll call down and see when I could get all the rooms in that one section. And so she went through the books, and she said, it looks like June something, 18th or something, they're all available. I said, okay, I'll take them all.
2003.
Yes. And so I said, well, I'll rent those, because I have my own, and we'll have a couple up at the top. And when I told all of you the date, Jody was looking in her calendar, and she said, she looked at me, she said, that's Father's Day weekend. I said, well, he's already looking out for us, he's already picked the time. So we'll all go down there, and it's on Father's Day weekend. And so after being down there, and I was sitting out on the little patio, and the wife, I said, I might as well move here.
So what's the story about this house?
Okay, this house. I decided then to come down in May, I think it was, because he passed away in March, and it was in May, and I said, I'll go down there for a week and look and see what I can find. I was still getting the little Salado newspaper and read the one ads of what the places were for sale. And there was one that seemed like to be for sale for a long time. And I thought, well, I'll look at that one. And so then I came down for a week, and I rented a car and stayed at my unit. And Diane then was a realtor, and she and Doug came up that weekend, and I told her different ones that I had thought about. And when I went to ask about them, they were already had, somebody wanted to put a down payment on them. So those were gone. So then we looked at some other ones, and I said, well, why don't we just have you sell my little unit? And we went and got a big sign that said for sale, put her telephone number on it. And so then I had to go back home, couldn't find anything. And she got 4 calls on my unit there before they got to Houston. And when the next weekend, or that weekend, the next Monday, I got a call from Doug, and he said, something just popped up on the internet, so we're going to drive right back over there and see if we can check it out. And so they got over here, and he said, I'll take pictures. And so they got over here, and she went to one realtor that she had contacted before, and to see if she could get in the house.
This house?
Yeah.
This house?
This one. And so this gal let her in and told her, you know, she's a realtor, she could look at any house. And so they went here, and Doug took pictures. Every angle you can imagine. Outside, inside. I knew exactly where it was, because I played that golf course. I knew where it was, and it's on the golf course. And I said, okay, you tell her I'll pay whatever he's asking for it. And so she did.
Who owned the house?
This was, okay, that's coming up. Because and she finally got it bought. And so she sent me the address. And so I sent the address to Jane Wilmer, my friend. Well, Jane, I just bought this house on Tres Vista. And she wrote back and said, you bought the Dr. Baden house. And I just almost got into a cold sweat. I couldn't believe I bought a house I was never in. And this man lived in Lake City for 30 years, was born and raised there.
Lake City, Iowa.
Lake City, Iowa.
Salado, Texas.
And Bill had been in this house. And I bought it sight unseen. You don't think there is some spiritual... And I thought, well, he's still looking out for me. I have to have that house. Well, the guy didn't really want to sell it to her, because he wanted his own ones to get the commission off of it.
Well, but you bought the house.
I bought the house.
And you moved to Texas.
And I moved to Texas.
Okay, what is life like in Salado now?
It was the best move I ever made. And because Salado has been so good for me, I love golf, and I loved art, and I loved the people, and I just loved the house. I loved where it was situated. It was small. It was easy to take care of.
What activities are you involved in?
And first I went to, after I got settled, I went and joined the golf club. I joined the women's group, and I asked the guy who was in charge, I said, you know, I have wanted to talk to some of the women. And he said, well, there's somebody in there, they're having a meeting pretty soon. I walked in there, and there was Bev Jones. Bev Jones, and we got to visiting. The first time I'd met her. And she played softball. We all played softball. She's a Presbyterian. Her birthday's in June. And we're visiting back and forth. I think we're going to get along. And she was then president of the women's group. And so I started playing golf with her. Well, then she would, well, you've got to come to church with us. And so that's how I went with her to church. And she was a baby doctor. She was a doctor here, lived here for years, and did preemies. And she was really one of the great friends. And she now has moved to the Outer Banks in North Carolina.
Tell me about what you bought 2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago. Well, I read where Mustang was having their 50th anniversary, and we owned the 1965 first Mustang. It was an olive green, and we drove that thing forever. And I think everybody, and we gave it to Cindy after she got married. Doug drove it, you drove it, everybody drove that.
What was the car like that you bought?
Well, now, when they had the 50th anniversary of the Mustang, I had to have a 50th anniversary Mustang convertible.
What color?
I'm ruby red, like this. And I had Doug help me fill out the form for the Ford company, you know, as to what kind of car I wanted. And my other car was 10 years old, and it was a Ford, because we'd always had Fords. And so I filled out it and brought it up to the Ford dealers and says, this is the car that I want, and I want that 50th anniversary one. And I worked with this one salesman, and it was fun. They were really fun.
You're 92 and a half, so what are your plans
for the future?
Yeah.
Well, I've always told everybody I was going to live to be 100. And I always thought I was. And I said, well, gosh, I don't have much further to go now. But I never think about age. I never have. It's like in 10-year cycles. Always has been. And I never really thought that much about it. I still feel like I did in the 60s, 50s, now that I'm in chair yoga.
Well,
I mean, it did help.
You're doing yoga.
I'm doing yoga. I went
Still playing golf?
I'm still playing golf. We have 3 times a week, we have our tea times.
You're still active in the church?
Yes, very active in the church, very active in the library,
Okay.
Mill Creek Association.
What advice would you have for your kids, your daughter-in-law, son-in-laws, your grandkids,
Yes.
great-grandkids? What advice would you have for them?
All I would say is stay active. Never sit down, and brood or think about, give up. always have a challenge, always have a new project, but always give yourself new things to think about. And I've never, I never went to college, I never, but I taught myself. I always figured this is what my parents did. They taught themselves how to do these things. So that's what I've always felt like. And so new things come along, writing a book, whatever. You just learn. And the more new things come about, and it's the same way with this yoga. It improved my health so much I needed to share it. And I wanted a bigger room. So then I went to the church because I wanted some way the church could help, because it had improved my health almost 100%. Because when I went to have my checkup this last time, in fact, they made me come because I had set an appointment. And she went through all the checkups and she said, "What happened to you?" I said, well, it was chair yoga.
So what advice would you give to your great-grandkids?
Great-grandkids, just stay active, learn. In school, learn as much as you can in school.
You got 7 great-grandkids and you have 1 on the way, right?
Yes, there'll be 8. 1 on the way, another Bill Jr. Bill the 4th.
Bill the 4th. Well, Letta, thank you for doing this. It's been
Okay.
great. I hope everyone enjoys it.
Oh, okay.